November numbers are out for the city of Toronto, and condos are the best performing property type and detached is the worst. Well, that's confusing, and I'm going to try to clear everything up in today's video. What I probably should say is that condos are the least worst performing asset class on a year-over-year basis, because the headline of this video I didn't write myself. In fact, it's some genius headline writing by the Toronto Star. Sales didn't plummet. Sales did what they typically do from October to November in regular years. And we forget that October and November of 2024 were actually pretty good months. So I'm going to break everything down in today's video, give you a real look at the numbers and what they mean, and why I think sometimes it's just so important to look behind the headline and fully understand what is happening. So my name is Tom Storey. Welcome back to the channel. We're going to get right into it today, but make sure to get subscribed. We just passed 21,000 subscribers, and like this video if you learned something new today. All right, let's jump right into the numbers. All right, this is the typical year over year that we're going to look at. I don't know. I've thought about this a lot, and maybe let me know in the comments, like, does year over year matter? I guess it matters if you bought exactly a year ago, but other than that, it's like we could compare it to 13 months ago, 14 months, 9 months. Is it really that big of a deal? I guess just because a year is a big thing. But we had 5,000 sales that happened in November. We had 5,900 that happened in November of 2024. So your sales volume was down 15%. New listings, this is interesting. This is something that probably the media isn't going to report on too much today when this data becomes available. But new listings was actually down. That new listing number had been up almost in every other market watch that I've seen so far this year. So even though the sales were down, so were the new listings. Obviously, they weren't both down 15%, so there was still more inventory based on the absorption that was happening. Your active listings are going to be up. That's been a trend we've seen. But that active listing number now for the like six different areas that it covers, the Greater Toronto area and all the other areas surrounding it, 24,500 active listings. That number was up to 30,000 in the summer. Now, again, that doesn't mean the market's gotten just magically better. That happens every year. Listings drop off as we head to the end of the year. So that's your year over year numbers. And the sales plummet from the headline is because this, but November last year was actually pretty strong, way stronger than the year before. Now let's take a look at kind of the most shocking data. Now, I'd started this video saying that condos were the best performing, and really they just went down the least, and detached is the worst performing. Like, that doesn't add up based on inventory levels, based on true market data that I'm seeing. And I actually went to an event last night. The Looney Hour guys were doing an investor event in Toronto, and we had just had Rich Diaz on the podcast. So I went to the event and they did a wonderful job, and I ran into Daniel Foch. And me and Dan had a quick conversation last night about these numbers. Like, this is weird, right? How is it showing that condos are only down 1.7% and detached is down 9%? It's got to be skewed because they're using average price. So I actually dug a little bit deeper into it. And what I found is that in November of 2025, 55% of the condos that sold were 2 bedrooms or bigger. And 45% of the condos that sold were 1+ dens, 1 bedroom, 0 bedrooms, right? So that was the delta in what was selling. A year ago, so compared to the numbers that it's comparing to a year ago, it was almost a 50-50 split. And at least in the 416 area code, your total sales volume was down 21% for condo properties. So 21% less sales happening and 5% more of the sales going to 2 bedrooms, which typically, in most circumstances, have a higher price because it's 2 bedrooms versus 1. That's why if I think like real data, I know the average price is going to show down 1.7%. I can tell you with all of our active condo listings right now, for certain, they're down more than 2% year over year. I'd say 3 to 7% really for most of what I'm seeing for the actual sales that are taking place versus what they would have been worth maybe a year ago. Same idea, and this is another thing I was talking to Dan with actually this morning, we were texting about it, is that 9% on detached. Do I think if you own a detached house and you watch this video that you're down 9% from last year? No, probably not. I think smaller detached homes are selling right now, and the numbers are skewed because the sales volume is lower and the higher price stuff isn't selling. It's not as bad as it seems on the detached, and it's not as kind of good as it seems, even though that's a negative number on the condo side. So hopefully that kind of clears things up. A few other numbers here. Obviously, detached homes are still expensive. Semi-detached is still 1.2 million. townhouses 870, and that condo number going over 700,000 again. It's like been hovering around there all year on the average sale price, even though we know benchmark price and real, like what I'm seeing selling properties, condo prices have shifted. So this is a new chart I've put together. I thought this would be helpful just to give you like a 5-month average of kind of what's going on, looking at sales, active listings, inventory level, and average price. So your sales volume, we had a really good July, dropped off in August, picked up a little bit in September. October was very strong and then dropped off again in November. Now, I've said publicly many times, I think sales have bottomed. Now, just because sales went down in November from October doesn't mean I was wrong about that. And even Ben Rabidou at the event last night kind of said the same thing for all of Canada. I think we're all kind of on that same page. Even the people that previously were pretty bearish on real estate, I think sales probably aren't going to be too much lower than what we're seeing right now. This is your typical October to November. So I also took a look at the numbers in November and ran your months of inventory. Now keep in mind, anything over 6 is very much a buyer's market. Anything under 3 is statistically a seller's market or pushing towards it. And from 3 to 6 is like that balanced out territory. So what we're seeing right now is that attached row townhouse, which is freehold townhouse, about 3 months of inventory, pretty balanced there. You're detached at 4.2, like firmly placed in a balanced market. Semi-attached at 2.2. That's just because they're the cheapest way to get into freehold property in great neighborhoods in Toronto, and there's just not as many of them. And they sell pretty quick, which is why the inventory level is what you're seeing there. Condo townhouses, 5 months of inventory, and your condo apartments, we are back to very much buyer's market, 6 months of inventory. Everything matters more in context. I've seen like these condo numbers were worse. They were 8 months. And it's a mix of sales have gotten better for number of transactions taking place over the last few months that we've seen, but also inventory has slowly started coming off the market. So both of those things are really important. We take a look at the end of November, what was for sale actively on the market. You can see that 57% of everything for sale in the city of Toronto was classified as a condo apartment, plus another 7% of condo townhouse, right? So following the trend we've seen this entire year, you add up condo apartment, condo townhouse, condo ownership, it makes up by far the biggest percentage of what is available for sale in the city of Toronto. Semi-attached only make up 5% of the active inventory, detached 27%, and your attached row townhouse 2.7%. The percentages haven't really changed all year. Just the total number of active listings has slightly gone down. Like that condo number at one point was like over 7,000. So it's a little bit better, but still like firmly in buyer's market territory. Now let's take a look at home sales so far in 2025. You see we kind of built up the year, dropped off in August like we always do, had a very, very strong October, most amount of sales we've seen in any month this year. And then we dropped off to kind of, again, that sales number is low, definitely on the 10-year average. But what you saw from October, the dip, it's kind of what we've seen in other regular years, if that's even a thing in the last 5 years. Now let's take a look at your condo sales. You can see that jumped up for most of the year, dipped off in August like we always do. October was still very strong, and then you had a dip off in November as well. So what does this all mean? Well, I've said previously, I'm not really concerned about November or December numbers because it's a quieter part of the year. The headlines are going to read really scary for this. I don't think these numbers are too bad. Homes didn't cut in half. Mortgage rates are still where they are today. People are transacting. We are finding, I can only talk from my own situation, but we had a very busy November in terms of sales volume. I think we helped like 14 people buy or sell properties in November as a team. So we were busy. We were doing things, but it's still, to this point, from my vantage point, an end user market. That's who's making decisions. The investors are like slowly watching what's going on, but they're not quite ready to jump in. Like we've had offers from investors on our listings, but they usually don't come to the price that we want, and we end up selling it to an end user. So I find that kind of interesting. There's also been like, I don't want to like start rumors, but there's been a lot of talk about the fact that pre-approval amounts have been a lot higher. The banks are kind of reporting on this, saying that, hey, in November, like they were up a lot. Those are people that theoretically will buy in the next 120 days if they're getting pre-approved right now. So maybe that's something to look for next year. I don't see anything in the economy, in the inventory levels, in the trends that I'm seeing in my day-to-day as a very active real estate agent that would tell me that prices are going to go up next year. I don't see it. That's not necessarily a bad thing. I think, and probably Bank of Canada's done cutting their rates. I'm pretty certain of that. They could prove me wrong in a few days. But I think this is a market that buyers, now that rates are going to stay where they are, there's a little bit more confidence with what's happening in sales volume. I think sales will pick up as we go into 2026. I think prices are going to stay the same, but I do believe that, I'm talking overall prices, I do believe still that like smaller condo segment of the market will continue to go down in price. I just don't see any other way based on their inventory levels are still very, very high. Hopefully that was helpful. My name's Tom Storey, and remember, home is where your story begins.